Thanks everybody for joining us. I'm Darren Smith. I'm the VP of Product at Epik. I've been in the video game industry for a really long time. For those of you who weren't around yesterday, I spent 20 years at Nintendo building game consoles like the Nintendo 64 and the Wii, 3DS, DSi, and made games and apps for all of them. So I'm really happy to be here to talk to you about working with NFTs in mainstream games. And at Epik, we are the leading B2B NFT platform, and we work with AAA game companies and giant entertainment IP to create in-game NFTs and marketplaces. And one of the great companies we work with is Ready Games. And I have Christina and Macedo here to talk about Ready Games. Why don't you introduce yourselves? Yeah, is this thing on?
Yeah, sure. So I'm Christina Macedo. I'm the COO of Ready Games. I've been building game tech for the past 5 years, primarily in the creator space, and primarily on mobile, essentially. And now we're sort of diving into creating more technology around avatars and game assets and allowing players to really become creators in the space and having them really be part of NFT transactions and building digital assets and really virtual identities essentially in games.
Can you tell us about the game we were working on with you?
Definitely. So like I mentioned, we've been building tech for the past 5 years that many companies and publishers use. But essentially through building avatar technology, what we realized was that what we were building was kind of awesome. So what we built, the game that we're partnering with Epik on is called Icon. And essentially, it's a mobile-first experience where we're building the tools, or we build tools so that anybody on mobile could create their digital assets for avatar, meaning your t-shirts, your pants, your skirts, your accessories directly on mobile, and then being able to upload it into a marketplace.
Great. So we're here in the Metaverse Dome, and I think it's an obligatory question everybody else has asked here, but what is a Metaverse?
So I think, we've heard that different definitions from a lot of people. But for me, it really is about a social experience in the virtual world. And that could be, many things. Facebook itself is a metaverse. As the Facebook it is, they're kind of using another name for it. But, when you're going on Instagram, when you're going in IMVU, when you're going into other avatar, or in my opinion, every little mobile game or games in general are metaverses in themselves. So where people sort of, come together in a virtual space, to me, is a metaverse.
I think I agree with you on that. We don't need to go too deep into it, come together to interact with each other. And usually to represent yourself in some form, like an avatar, how you look or how you want to look, or maybe you're a completely different person in some cases. Is that what you're imagining?
Exactly. I think that's where, the popularity of avatar is coming into place. You could really build that unique identity. It doesn't have to represent yourself, yourself that is present in the actual physical space. You can really reinvent yourself in the digital space and reinvent yourself as many times as you want. But most importantly, I think that avatars is sort of that forefront of what your unique virtual identity will be. And I think that's obviously, we'll dive a little bit deeper into it. But that virtual identity and the fact that people want to own everything that surrounds that virtual identity is sort of the foundation of NFTs, essentially.
Yeah, I think there's kind of 3 different types, maybe not exactly 3, but around 3 different types of metaverses out there. There's the kind that are just purely social. There are the kinds that are social, but the user can generate some game inside of it, like Roblox. And then there's games that themselves become a social experience, and that's their own metaverse. Fortnite as an example, right?
Yeah.
It's a great game, but people get there for a social experience. How do you see NFTs playing a role in those different types of metaverses?
Yep. Well, interestingly enough, every three that you brought up has the word social.
That's true.
So, the way that we're looking at technology and how to support developers and being able to really get into this world is by supporting them in creating the social economy. That's the way that we see it in gaming. It is a new form of e-commerce, essentially, directly in games. And NFTs is not only going to be a method that developers can monetize, but a method for creators to monetize, essentially. And then for players, right, we really do have those three realms where players now have an opportunity to go into games and being able to invest in their digital or virtual identity. That being not only in skins and other avatar cosmetics, but in badges and stickers, in team merchandise, for example, really building that virtual identity and how they want to present themselves. And I think that one of the most important things to remember, I think, for developers is to keep an open mind, where NFTs shouldn't only sort of be segregated in one game. They should sort of be open, where you could use, an NFT you find or you buy or you trade in one game and sort of be able to, use it in another game, in different sort of ways. So I think for me, NFTs is really, in games is about building that virtual identity and investing in the way that you want to be perceived in that sort of space.
Yeah, I think as people want to build out their avatars in one space, they're going to spend a lot of money, and they're definitely going to want to make it portable. And I think that's actually where NFTs play a big role in that actually happening. And I know you're working on making that happen. Exactly.
I also wanted to mention, we often talk about NFTs as the one thing. But I think that sort of the future for me in NFTs is, again, players sort of saying, well, I want to own what I want to buy. I don't want it to just be a consumable where I'm just purchasing it and it sort of disappears after. I want it to follow my identity. And I think that, yes, rare items are incredibly important, but where I see NFTs going is definitely in collectibles and badges and, battle passes that sort of follow you throughout game to game.
Oh, that's amazing. How are you doing that at Ready Games, making that actually happen?
So we've built, like I mentioned, we've built a backend infrastructure to support the meta story of the games. So developers are really, really, really good at building game mechanic. Where a lot of challenges derive from is building the meta story, the social aspect of the game. And the social aspect and the meta story is what differentiates a game from being fun to not fun. So in the infrastructure that we're building, everything that derives from that infrastructure, games, assets, profiles, game passes, and so on, are usable game to game to game to game. We are creating a portable infrastructure and building a community of developers where, yes, they're building games and they want their game to be successful, but their game can be equally as successful in an open market and having all of these games sort of live and share assets together.
Yeah, I think one of the other applications of NFTs in the metaverse is in bringing the real world into the metaverse. We're
Right.
bringing licensed content into the metaverse, and that is another area where NFTs can just make that easy. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think, just to add to what you're saying, I think the gentleman that was here before talking about concerts and experiences in games. So, when there are events in games, merchandise and collectibles, having, for example, that band T-shirt, or getting a band T-shirt because you went to that concert and being able to use that T-shirt on your avatar in various games and have that portability aspect of that T-shirt, is very important to the consumer. So allowing that opportunity actually allows for much more monetization to happen.
That's great. I was going to ask you about monetization, exactly. So how do you see NFTs contributing to the monetization of existing games?
So there's definitely, like I mentioned, there's three different sort of pillars. There's the developer, the creator, and the player. For the developer, the monetization is opening a completely new path in being able to monetize the digital assets that are available in their games. For a lot of mobile developers, so we've really worked on creating mobile technology because we want to really reach the masses. We want to be able to support developers in Indonesia and Asia and the Philippines and so on. That really for that population, they're accessing games and digital content on their phones. And by allowing sort of this technology to live on mobile and through these mobile games, it's giving a completely new path to a lot of these developers to monetize what's happening in their games. We're seeing ARPU, for example, going from $1, $2 to $25 because players are willing to invest in their virtual identity. For creators, it's giving them a completely new platform. We're saying, with our game icon and sort of the marketplace for creators, this is Etsy for the virtual space. It's also an interesting way of getting women into the space as well that are much more DIYers and, essentially living on their mobile phone and giving them tools to be able to create digital assets directly on the phone and being able to upload it onto the marketplace. And for players, like I mentioned, it's about investing in your virtual identity and not having, multiple identities in various games, but having that one identity that allows you to, bring your collectibles through the different experiences that you go through. I think
so it's not just a new revenue stream for the game, but it's also a new revenue stream for the users
player,
themselves as they
exactly.
generate content that could then become an NFT.
Yep.
Yeah, that's wonderful. So I think one of the things we think about in licensing, well, I'll move on. So mainstream games generate a lot of money from just things that aren't NFTs, even like Fortnite sells certainly a lot of things that aren't NFTs, just as traditional items. So for mainstream game players, how important is it for a digital item like an NFT to be rare or available for like a limited time? What do you think?
It's, again, all connected to your virtual identity. So when items are rare, they sort of put you, it's a method for you to show off, especially, essentially. But there are the two types of sort of NFTs. You have the rare, one golden egg that you're purchasing to really stand apart. And then you have the NFT that is more in a capsule collection or limited in time that allows you to collect. And just like in the real world, I mean, people in general, purchase collectibles to kind of refine and define who they are. I mean, I don't know here who's like a huge Harry Potter fan, but if you've ever heard, Harry Potter enthusiasts, they're literally buying everything because it defines their personality. I mean, we can go into Hello Kitty and so on and so on and so on. Think of your favorite band and the merchandise that you have. It defines who you are. So I think the rarity and rarity in time is really kind of going to be the outlier in games because it's going to allow people to purchase and be able to buy the next collection and the next collection and the next collection because it really validates who they are in this virtual place or who they want to be in the virtual space.
So there's things people buy to collect. They might not necessarily be part of their personality, they're collectibles, but there's also the things that people buy to express themselves as part of their identity. Yeah, I have a friend at Nintendo who's been there, I think been working there for about 15 years now, and he is a massive Nintendo collector, and he owns virtually everything you could possibly buy. He often posts stuff on Instagram with his collection. It's an amazing display. But he also, that is his personality. Like if you see him out and about, he has a Nintendo hat on, a Nintendo, ugly Christmas sweater, and he has the whole thing. So that's
really
part of
great.
his identity. When you see
Exactly.
him, like Dylan Rhodes, if you're listening, he is like Mr.
Yeah.
Nintendo. So I think one of the big problems and difficulties in designing a game is creating like proper balance in the game. And when NFTs have utility in the game,
Yep.
that can kind of upset the balance of the game. And then of course they cost money, so you run into this sort of like pay-to-win scenario. How do you balance the game when that happens?
That comes back to the meta story portion. So a lot of the social experience doesn't actually happen in the game itself. It happens outside of the game. It's the meta story. It's your profile. It's whom you're connecting outside of the game. And for a lot of developers, they can't forget about that. They can't forget about the opportunity for players to invite their friends and be able to chat about game moments that just happen in the game, or inviting their friends to be part of a team, and having a PvP experience that is more team related than solo related. So the most important part is just not forgetting about that meta story and making sure that the NFTs are sort of an outlier of the meta story. And that's sort of the way to really make sure that the NFTs are really valued by players.
Great. I think one of the things I wanted to talk to you about was the hashtags that
Yes.
That you have for Icon. Can you share a little bit about that? It's, I think, an interesting, different aspect for how to use NFTs.
Definitely. So, interesting fact about the company is we actually have 47% of our gaming company is women, which is really unheard of. And one of the things that really diving into is e-commerce in the space. So like I mentioned, the creator is more and more going to become important in the gaming space. We want to allow people to just create digital assets and share, and have developers have sort of a way of purchasing even assets that could be useful to them, and really building an economy in the game space. And the way that we're approaching markets is through what we're looking at hashtags. So if we're looking at any social media app, the way that people are purchasing items and so on is through hashtags. They're going on Instagram, they're looking at hashtag dresses, and they're looking at the different influencers that are selling what they're looking for, clicking on the link and purchasing the item. We really see that same mechanism going to happen in games. Like I explained, the meta story is incredibly important. That meta story is that social experience. Feeds in games is going to become incredibly important. Sharing what you own, sharing what you're wearing, sharing the game moments. And the feed itself in the game, the social experience, will become the e-commerce in game. So the hashtags that we currently have in one of our games, Icon, creators can upload their designs directly in the marketplace. They select which storefront they want. Example, hashtag dresses. We actually are selling the storefronts as NFTs. We think that in games, not only are there the players, but there's obviously the investors. So you can be a user in a game or a participant of a game, but not necessarily play in the game space, but live in sort of that meta story space. And essentially, when a creator uploads their designs, that design is sold. They get a percentage of the revenue, but so does the storefront owner. So that NFT generates revenue within that marketplace. And that's really interesting. I think, once again, we can't forget about the creator space in games, because it essentially is going to become really the driving force of the economy, essentially in games.
So do you want to tell people where they can get those hashtags?
They can. So you can obviously go on Epik and look at our storefronts that are currently for sale. And Icon is currently in beta. We do have a really interesting project with a new collaboration with Smiley. When we're talking about collaborators or creators, we're talking about big brands that want to come into the virtual space. And when we're talking about creators as well, as we're thinking about the player that wants to also sort of be more involved, more engaged in games, and allowing them to have a space to also sell their capsule collections or digital assets.
So please visit epicprime.com and go to our marketplace. You can look for Icon's collection there, and please, the hashtags are up for auction right now. They've been up just pretty much
Couple
before
hours.
we started here.
And any owner of, like I explained, any owner of a marketplace is really generating revenue, not only from the value that that hashtag is gaining, but from the value that they're going to get from the usability of that storefront.
So there's a lot of indie developers that want to make their games mainstream, of course, and they're looking to use NFTs for that. And a lot of them are looking like more around the speculative value of NFT to make the game fun. But I think what gets lost in that is the game still needs to be fun itself.
Yeah.
So what advice would you give to indie developers who are trying to take this approach to be successful?
I think that for developers, I mean, their passion is making games and working on just elevating the game mechanics that are already out there. Not forgetting the meta story, not forgetting the social layer, not forgetting the power of having friends, inviting friends, chatting, showing off. When we talk about showing off, we're always talking about avatars and badges and so on, but not forgetting that gameplay itself is a huge driver. I mean, Twitch, what are we doing on Twitch? We're watching gameplay. So just not to forget that, we want to create a community and a connection in the games themselves. And that's certainly the outlier of what makes a game, fun.
Yeah, winning money is one game mechanic, but there are many, many others. So please explore the many other game mechanics available to you. I think we think about it like you can make a casino game in two ways. One, you can win real money, and the other, you can win virtual money. And there's a lot of games out there that make a lot of money when you're only winning virtual money.
Most actually are much more.
That's right.
Exactly.
How do you see the evolution of NFTs? Like, when you picture where's NFTs going, what's your vision?
So right now we're thinking of NFTs as just that thing you own, that rare item. The evolution will be that NFTs NFTs already allow true ownership. And for players, when you're telling them, when you buy this, you actually own it, you're building really your virtual identity. So that's where I see NFTs going, is not so much only, those one rare items, but those collections, those collectibles that are going to define who you are, in the virtual space.
I think for us, when we started our company in 2018, sort of the dawn of NFTs, we had this vision for where it was going to go. Starting with licensed content and branded content and moving into games. And then even at that time, looking at the Metaverse, where those things are shared among them. And I think we're seeing it playing out today. And I think with NFTs playing a key part in how the Metaverse works. Obviously, bringing the real world into the Metaverse is key for how NFTs work. And being able to share content across different Metaverses is the role that NFTs will play in that.
Exactly. I think that's what will be sort of the driver in keeping the Metaverse space opened, is that as players really invest in their identity, if there's one company saying, well, we're just going to close you up and we're going to make you just live in our Metaverse, I don't know if players are really going to like that. Right? So it is really about opening it up, really encouraging developers to open up to the concept of having players move from one space Metaverse game to another space Metaverse game, and allowing them to bring that identity with them. And I think NFTs are really going to be a driver that allows us to keep the space really free from just living in one little hole.
Yeah, for us, we believe the future of merchandise is digital and personal, and there's going to be an NFT for everything. So that's kind of where we see it going. How important do you think licensed content is to NFTs? We're a digital licensing agency as well as a technology company. So how do you see the licensed content playing a role in NFTs and in mainstream games?
So important. Even though a virtual identity may not represent who you are in real life, one thing that is true is that as humans, we associate ourselves to brands if we like it or not. And I think that licensed content and having sort of, brands really kind of come into the virtual space allows, again, for you to really build out whom you want to be in that space and who your identity is. And licensed content is equally, content from bands, from games themselves. So we're saying, if you really love a game, the developers should be able to have their merchandise kind of available. Why not, purchase a T-shirt of that game and wear it, across different metaverse experiences, and so on. So I think that licensed content and really encouraging brands to become virtual is going to be interesting. And I actually see it as a flip. It'll be really interesting to purchase something and we already see it and we're already doing tests around it, but purchasing a T-shirt in the digital world and actually having it shipped in the real world where you can kind of show it off in the opposite way. So I think that just licensed content is going to be another form of building that identity that you want to have in the digital space.
Yeah, that's great. I think when we're talking about new revenue streams,
Exactly.
I think the licensed content actually adds to that. I think
100%.
as people, you would buy a generic shoe, or would you buy a Nike shoe, and you can raise the price point higher with branded content.
Absolutely.
So, for the mainstream video game player, how aware are they of NFTs right now?
They're aware of the fact that when they will purchase something, they will own it. And they are aware that they can now take more time in developing their identity. And that's really the outlier, is NFTs truly will allow for an open space and will allow for players to feel like the time that they're spending in games is not only fun and obviously they're enjoying it, but has value to building who they want to be in these spaces, and even just allowing them to build out new revenue sources. If they're really good in a game and they're able to find hidden NFTs or special Game Pass moments and or passes and so on, and able to sort of sell those across, why not give them also players a new revenue stream? Because if they're investing time in your game, there should be a way for you to pay them back for that.
Yeah, I agree. Like the true ownership aspect is something that is so important to me, and it's one of the reasons I joined Epik, is because knowing that players invest so much time and money, they should be able to take the thing with them.
Right now, it's 4.2 hours are spent in games and apps per day per person. When we think about that, we're awake for about 13 hours or so a day. I mean, that's kind of mind-boggling. People are investing a lot of their time, almost half the time that they're spending at work. So it is something to consider, and not to forget that, there's a really huge untapped market out there. And I think games is just starting to sort of get into this space, but there's a lot more to kind of consider, especially when looking at not just the player buying, but the creator creating and the developer that's allowing the moments to happen, the experience to be open.
Great. Well, I think we should wrap it up here. It was great chatting with you, Christina. Look forward to seeing great things from Ready Games, and hope everybody checks us out at epicprime.com.
And if anybody has any questions, really easy to join, to reach me, Christina, Christina, @ready.gg.
Thanks, everybody.